Welcome to the Youth Ministry Network's third Tuesday conversation. I'm Danica Montplaisir, and we're really glad to have you with us today. We hope that the sun's shining where you are. It is for the first time in a long time in Minnesota, so that's a good thing. Hey to everybody who listens regularly, and a special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. If you are joining us for the first time, I want you to know that 3TC is an informal network gathering, and it's geared to be just that. We hope that you've grabbed your cup of coffee and that you'll settle in wherever you are to chat a little bit about particular ministry topics. In order to make this an interactive conversation over coffee, we'd encourage you to type in your question in the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll be sure to pass your question along to our guests. I'd like to welcome Mark and Dave to our network gathering. Thanks for being here with us today, guys. How you doing?
Good. Good morning.
Very well, thanks.
Or afternoon, depending on where you are.
Good. Great. Well, we've invited you here to talk with us today a little bit about the SALT program. And we think it's of particular interest as we gear up for summer trips and opportunities with kids, as they might be summer trips of service and things like that. But wondering if, before we get talking about that, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your family, or what kinds of things you keep busy with when you're not writing SALT curriculum.
Well, I keep busy with the last of 5 kids, 4 of whom have gone to college and are out of the home, probably returning soon to pay off college debts, and one high school junior, and when I have a chance, I try to get out and paddle in my kayak and enjoy the out of doors here in the great Northwest. This is Dave.
This is Mark. I teach at Trinity Lutheran College along with Dave, next door neighbors here. These days I'm enjoying a toddler, 2.5 years old, who just a few minutes ago I can see out my window playing in our rooftop garden. And he comes to the Child Care Center here. And we're in our finals week here at the college, so it's a busy, kind of crazy week, but we're glad to wrap up a very productive semester and year.
Awesome. All right, so let's just dive right in. How about? Tell us a little bit about your project, SALT. Maybe where it came from, what sort of things that you learned along the way, and we'll sort of move that into feedback or results of what you gleaned from that.
Well, this is Dave. I'll start just very briefly, a little history. The SALT project, which stands for Service and Learning Leadership Team, was a project we began about 7 years ago, funded by Thrivent Financial, which created an initiative around youth leadership, and we decided to focus on service learning, which was a passion and an interest of ours. And we began really looking across the board and seeing what the resources were, what training was out there. On the basis of that, we developed our own training, worked with our own students and some churches and organizations, teamed up with a local camp, have been developing resources over the last several years and are learning as we go, and most recently have been engaged in a major research project, which we'll be telling you about in more detail. So you can see the SALT website, and we're passionate about it, and we're learning, and we have a lot to share in the next little bit.
I think I would just say something about the service learning process itself, and I think there's a slide there that talks about the outcomes of service learning, if that can go up. What we kind of supposed was that service learning has some outcomes, some markers, you might say, in the lives of Christian young people. We started with the idea that lives can be transformed, so you see life transformation there in the middle. And then out of transforming lives, we believe that young people can be led to greater, deeper, maybe areas around compassion, being in community with others, advocacy, asking bigger, tougher questions, exploring their gifts and how that comes out in leadership, how they can be joyfully engaged in lifelong servanthood so that service isn't a one-time activity, but lifelong and ongoing. And lastly, that they might explore their sense of vocation and God's call. So we think that service learning can lead to those. And to do that, we developed a process, and that's that next slide, which we essentially developed a 4-step process of preparation, getting ready for a service experience, the actual action or doing the service experience, reflection afterwards, and then ultimately celebration, which might also include evaluation, but kind of celebrating the process. So what we've largely done, we'll talk about this research project in just a minute, is see how does this process work? Does it work? How does it work?
The actual research project was a natural outgrowth of what we were learning. We partnered with ELCA Youth Ministry with research and evaluation, centered particularly around the 2009 gathering in New Orleans, which had a major, really had a major focus on the issue of service and work throughout the community. So there was a project that we set up where there were questions developed to test those outcomes to see if, in fact, through preparation, action, reflection, and celebration, those outcomes could be measured. So there was a pre-test and a post-test, and we have a lot of good information and data that we've been analyzing, and our research project is now at a point of figuring out what all that means. We've made some recommendations to the next gathering on the basis of what we've learned, and have some writing projects in the works right now. We found, first of all, just that the actual experience, even though it was a one-day experience, was very transformative. We had 2 groups in particular that were tested. There were a number of congregations, 13 or 14 congregations that were pre-selected or self-selected, who we trained in the preparation, action, reflection, celebration process. They used it very intentionally leading up to the gathering and during the gathering. And then we had another group that was not trained and not as intentionally focused, and so we've compared the results between those and the research, again, as I said, shows some significant areas of growth, and maybe I can just quickly say what the areas of growth, in particular, the largest areas of growth are, and then Mark will build a little on that with some correlations. The 2 areas that showed the most significant, there were 36 outcome statements, and 8 of those outcome statements showed significant increases, although there were increases in many other areas. The 2 that had the largest increases were in the area of compassion and exploration of vocation. Just a comment or 2 on each of those. There were also significant changes in community advocacy and leadership, but compassion was particularly intriguing to see that the results from the youth who participated pre- and post-test saw a growth in the desire to respond to the hardship of others. That was the way the compassion question, or one of them, focused. Also, it was interesting to see how there was a real biblical connection there. In several of these, both compassion and vocation, we saw that young people indicated that they had made a connection between what the Bible teaches about compassion and about community and also vocation. So those were 2 significant ones. One more word on the vocation piece. Young people again indicated a deeper sense of God's call to serve others, and also as they are making decisions for their life, that service was helpful as they were looking at their various options and possibilities for their lives. So the 2 highest areas of growth were in compassion and exploration of vocation. There was also change and growth in community advocacy and leadership.
Awesome.
The other part, I guess I would just add, is we also looked at a correlation, which is essentially what's the relationship between young people participating in preparation, action, reflection, celebration, and their ability to grow in those areas. And of our 36 outcome statements, 20 of them statistically showed growth. And the two highest, interestingly enough, were around their feelings around experiencing community, being strengthened as a Christian, and having a greater desire to be involved in congregational ministry that focused on serving others. There were several others in the area of servanthood and compassion and leadership, and also exploring vocation. And so what this essentially demonstrated was going through an intentional process could in fact lead young people to have a richer, deeper experience in a number of areas. That's a lot of research in about 3 minutes.
Good job. Is there anything else that you sort of are excited to share with the network about things that are going to be happening, going forward with this? What things you might do with the research, things like that?
Well, that might come up in a minute here. Well, one thing, Dave mentioned the Bible and the connection that young people had around biblical texts or biblical concepts. Dave and I have been invited to work with Select Learning, who's working with the ELCA Book of Faith Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
They have a series called Teaching the Bible with Children, Youth, and Families. And Dave and I believe Peggy Cantos-Hahn and some others will be doing a unit on the relationship between how you can even teach the Bible and biblical concepts using service and mission experiences. So that's one thing we'll be doing, and I believe those will be out next winter. So that's one thing.
And
Cool.
and there will be a major, again, service component in the 2012 New Orleans gathering, and Mark and I are going to be helping with training there. We did some training, and we want to do an even better job of helping to prepare the servant companions, the young adults who will be accompanying the young people on their service experiences in 2012. So we're beginning to ramp up and imagine how can we improve upon what we did last time, so that those who are accompanying and kind of processing and helping with the reflection can do an even more skilled job in that regard in New Orleans in 2012. So those are two things right off the top that are in the works right now.
Cool. I'm wondering, before we take questions, and I want to remind the people who are listening in that you can type in a question at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll pass it along. But my last question is, as youth workers, people who are on this call are primarily that, wondering if they're, as they think about their various service learning trips or other service opportunities that will come up this summer, how might they work this SALT format into their curriculum for their summer and sort of move from this sort of service project to, a service learning type of model?
Mm-hmm.
Several suggestions, and again, these flow out of the research. We really found a significant factor in the depth of the service learning and the, in a sense, power of service learning in the role of the adults who were working with the young people. Now that probably seems obvious, and oftentimes research confirms what we already know in our gut. But it was very powerful to see that those young people who had the most transformation in their thinking, their feeling, their actions were very, very closely related to I would say, the strength, the faith maturity, the training actually of the adults who accompanied them and who helped them to process what they experienced. A very quick story from New Orleans. I accompanied a group, and we went to a fairly affluent neighborhood, and I was overhearing the conversations of a number of the young people saying, why are we serving here? And we had some skilled adults in the group, and they heard that, didn't deny it or ignore it. they began the conversation, and in the process, the young people themselves saw that we're called to serve all people, and that the witness of the young people in the group was a very powerful message of love and faith that the people we were serving very much appreciated and needed. So the role of adults is a key one. So it's more than finding a chaperone, and we all know that, but how do we equip, train, prepare, support, affirm, appreciate the adults who work with our young people? That was a key one.
Another thing would be, and it's kind of related, is to have a good orientation and preparation, that preparation stage of getting the young people to understand what they're doing and why they're doing, so as opposed to maybe working with a mission organization or a local service project and just simply showing up, but it's to have some description of what is the organization, who does it serve, why is it an important ministry or mission that the young people are involved with. That was pretty key as well. And then the other thing would be how we do reflection. Sometimes we do a service project and then just kind of leave the reflection and the learning piece to chance. Mm-hmm. And so one suggestion would be to think very creatively to make sure that reflection is done. So whether it's a conversation, small group conversations, if it's journal writing, we also think about creative reflection, like having kids tell stories, share photo slideshows, write poetry, music, paint, dance, draw, whatever it is, to think of ways to allow young people to kind of process the experience.
Great.
And that would be an important factor, I think, for anyone coming up this summer, is think about how you not only do the service project itself, but how you allow young people to reflect and kind of engage with it during and after the actual experience.
Sure. That's great. All right, we're going to jump. We have about 10 minutes left, so I've got a couple of questions coming in here and want to make sure that we give those ample time. So the first question we've got is wondering, do some of the congregations / youth ministries which you've partnered with, do they have the potential to become teaching parishes for your model?
They absolutely not only have the potential. In fact, in some cases, we've met at the extravaganza the last several years, and without our saying it, a number of them have basically begun training, have gone to synodical and regional events, and have begun spreading the word, sharing the video that we've produced, and doing that kind of training. Probably our challenge will now be to continue to equip and empower those congregations. And I think people have found the tools that we've shared and learned from each other. They want to train others. So absolutely. And just the question kind of prompts us to say, how can we be more intentional to both encourage that, but also to make those folks, as they're able, available to other parts of the country to do training.
Great. Just a reminder, you can keep your questions coming. Our next one is, how do you teach, quote unquote, teach reflection to young people? As in, how do they reflect their experience?
How does that reflection happen?
How do you teach that to young people? How do we help them to figure out how to articulate their experience?
Sure. The one thing you might do, I'm trying to think what's available on our website, which you'll see again here in a minute on the screen, but I think the key in reflection is that we set up the environment that allows them to process the experience. So we don't necessarily teach the kids how to do reflection, but we set up the environment that they can move through. And one of the ways, very simply, I would say a simple pattern is to think of a series of 3 questions, and those questions are what, so what, now what. And the what question is to invite young people to just reflect on what they did, what they observed, what role they played. The so what question is where you can invite them to process their feelings, their kind of emotional self, as well as what they're thinking about, kind of what's going on in their minds. And then the now what questions, or part of reflection becomes, what difference does this make in my life? What behaviors might I change? What am I more interested in learning or doing as we move forward? So there's a series of questions or reflection activities you can do that allow young people to first start with just their reflection on the experience and then move to how they, what they're thinking and feeling, and then ultimately what they would do to apply. And I would just say that sometimes we start with the last question. We say, what differences does this make in your life? When we really need to start first with just what did you do, what are you thinking and feeling, and then move to the application. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's good. I hope that
I guess
answers.
the only other thing I would say, as I mentioned earlier, is to think creatively and not just think journaling or small group questions or large group conversation, but kids have multiple learning styles. They learn and process differently and in different time frames, and so to allow a variety of opportunities for them to reflect, that would be a good suggestion.
And let me just add one other piece that Mark and I, in terms of resources, are beginning to imagine and trying to put together. One of the ideas we're thinking of that could be used in New Orleans, but could also be used across the church, and not just the Lutherans, but other churches, would be a phone app. We know our young people all have phones, or most of them have phones, and we're thinking of developing an app which would allow for reflection, that would provide some devotions and some resources, and not just reflection with the people who are there, but could allow young people to send pictures to their friends back home, their family, and that those, what they share would be kind of widening the circle of reflection beyond just the youth group or just the people participating in the project. Because I think that's a key part that we're seeing in the research is, how does this come home? How does this find connection in the local community and not just an event someplace else? How can they begin to learn to tell their story in creative ways? So we're hoping that we can use some creative technology to enhance that part of the reflection and the celebration part.
Awesome. That'd be great. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to with the 2012 gathering, is this piece of articulating our story. So I think that that'd be a great tool to help congregations bring the story back home. It's awesome. Our next question comes from Chris Oakey, wondering, are there things that we can do to set the table for an experience, to set good expectations for a trip or a group?
Yeah, this is Mark, and I'll take a shot at that. This is our whole idea of preparation. Often we just raise money, collect tools, and get in the van or the airplane. This would be a chance, I think, to set the table or set the environment, sometimes called preflection as opposed to reflection, is how do we even ask before we engage on maybe, let's say, a summer mission trip, is before we go, ask young people, what do you plan to get out of, or what are you expecting? What drew you to this? And it might be, well, I was going to go to Disneyland afterwards or whatever, but to really just honestly have them name what their expectations are. Forming a group covenant would be a good idea. Definitely learning about the place you're going to be, you're going to go. If it's out of country, to learn, if it helps to learn some phrases, have some kids in your youth group teach Spanish or French phrases, to help you interact with people. Certainly bring in scripture and find ways to talk about whether it's service or journeying or transformation, poverty, justice issues, go to the Bible and have Bible studies. So the idea is just to move it beyond fundraising and getting the supplies ready, but really thinking how you can make it a meaningful experience, which, by the way, turns the mission trip not into a trip, but into an experience that comes before and after, or a service project instead of a one-time event. It kind of, you can do learning and beforehand, but that setting the table is an important thing. I think if you go, again, on our website, under resources, there's a number of resources and links that we have to different curriculum that's already written, that it's already out there. We don't need to reinvent it, but some links to places that have some creative ideas on how to do that. But it's definitely important to set that environment beforehand.
I would just add, too, that to move beyond an event or a one-time thing, think about partnerships. That service learning is a process, but it's also partnerships. The organizations you're serving and working with, how can those be not just one-time experiences, but experiences that could develop over time and be sustained? You know, I know a number of congregations that have developed more long-term connections, whether they be international or regional, and there's a return and an involvement, not just one-way street are going, but also people coming from those communities. One of the groups that I've worked with is Esperanza in Mexico, and we had an event recently, and several folks from the Esperanza community came to that event. So in a sense, preparation involves those people telling their story before the event. So I think it's really crucial to not just have us going in one direction, but to make it a real partnership, a mutual experience, so that we're learning from in the early stages and we're making some relational connections before the event happens.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question. This question comes from Elizabeth Pedersen. What difference does the level of cross-cultural engagement make in the outcomes of the experience?
It's interesting. I was the conference I spoke at with others at Seattle University last weekend was on that whole area of cross-cultural, and I think the more the cross-cultural opportunity is there, the better. But oftentimes we don't do adequate preparation, and again, I would reiterate saying that partnership is so crucial. If we're experiencing new cultures and we come in without preparation, we run the risk of not really seeing the gifts that those cultures have to share with us. So I would say, again, preparation is really, really crucial. And think of all the areas of culture. Think of music, think of dance, think of poetry, think of all the riches of culture, food, and how can those be a part of the preparation and the experience itself.
Cool. Great. Well, I know we've only scratched the surface of all the work that you have done with this. I'm excited that you've given us the opportunity to get a free copy of the training DVD, so make sure that you take advantage of that, people who are listening in. I'll send the questions that we didn't get to, I'll send them on to Mark and Dave, and they can hopefully respond to you directly. And let's see, I don't want to miss who is there. So before we close the call, I want to make sure I have those questions. Thanks for being with us, guys, and for sharing this with us. We want to make sure that everyone knows that you can learn more information about the SALT project or the other ministries of Trinity Lutheran College. You can find it on their website, here www.salt.org or at tlc.edu. Want to make you aware of a special edition that we're going to be having about the 2012 ELCA Youth Gathering. We'll have Heidi Hagstrom and Donna Weigel as our guests for a special edition on August 16th. We're taking the summer off again from 3TC because everyone's running all over the countryside and the world. We'll resume our 3TC with this special edition, and you'll be able to ask questions directly to Heidi and Donna, which I think is a really great and unique opportunity. We'll resume with our regular 3TC on September 20th with Karen Stevenson, and we'll be talking about talking with young people about sex and sexuality. So, thanks again for another great year of 3TC. We hope you have a great summer, and thanks as always for hanging out with us on the third Tuesday of the month. We'll see you back here in August. Have a great day.
Thanks, Danica.